The fluorescent lights of the diner buzzed overhead like dying insects, casting a sickly yellow glow across the cracked linoleum floor. I could feel the grease in the air settling on my skin, mixing with the sweat that had been accumulating during my double shift. My feet ached in the worn sneakers I'd bought from a thrift store 3 months ago, the soles so thin I could feel every pebble on the pavement when I walked home. I wiped down the same table for the 3rd time, my movements mechanical, invisible. That's what I'd become in the 8 months since everything fell apart, a ghost moving through spaces, serving coffee to people who never looked up from their phones, collecting tips that barely covered rent on the studio apartment I shared with the rats in the walls. The bell above the door chimed, and I didn't need to look up to know who it was. I could smell his cologne before I saw him. The same woody, expensive scent he'd worn when we were together, when I thought I knew what love meant, before I discovered what betrayal tasted like. Emma. His voice cut through the diner's ambient noise. The sizzle of the grill, the clatter of dishes, the murmur of late-night conversations. I forced myself to turn, to meet those familiar brown eyes that had once looked at me like I was precious. Now they held something else, contempt mixed with a proprietary concern that made my stomach turn. Marcus. I kept my voice flat, neutral. Your usual? Where are you going dressed like that? He ignored my question, his gaze traveling from my stained uniform to the black dress I'd hung on a hook in the back room, visible through the kitchen's pass-through window. The dress. God, the dress. It was the nicest thing I'd owned in months, bought with tips I'd been saving for 3 weeks. Nothing extravagant, just a simple black number that made me feel like maybe I was still a person who deserved to exist in spaces beyond this grease-stained purgatory. None of your business. I turned back to my table, but his hand shot out, gripping my wrist. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to stop me. Emma, come on. We need to talk about the baby, my daughter. Lily, 3 years old with his dark curls and my green eyes. Currently at my mother's house because I couldn't afford childcare and still make rent. The thought of her, sleeping in her grandmother's guest room, surrounded by the few toys I'd managed to keep when we lost the apartment, made my chest constrict. You mean the child support you haven't paid in 4 months? I kept my voice low, aware of the other customers, of my boss wiping down the counter with his usual scowl. Or did you mean the custody arrangement you ignore whenever it's inconvenient? His jaw tightened. I've been dealing with some financial issues. You're wearing a watch that costs more than my annual income. The Rolex gleamed on his wrist, catching the diner's harsh light. He'd always had money, or at least access to it. His family owned a chain of car dealerships across the state. What he hadn't had was loyalty or honesty, or any sense of responsibility beyond his own comfort. Look, he said, his tone shifting to that condescending patience that used to make me feel small. I'm worried about you. Going out, leaving Lily with your mother all the time. You're meeting someone, aren't you? The audacity. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of the man who'd cheated on me while I was pregnant, who'd emptied our joint account and left me with a 2-month-old and an eviction notice, now standing in my workplace and questioning my choices. My shift ends in 10 minutes. You need to leave. Who is he? Marcus's voice dropped, taking on an edge I recognized, jealousy. As if he still had any claim to me, to my life, to my future. Some guy you met here? Another deadbeat who can't... She said leave. The voice came from behind Marcus. Smooth and quiet, and somehow more threatening than if it had been shouted. The temperature in the diner seemed to drop 10 degrees. I looked past Marcus's shoulder and felt the air leave my lungs. The man standing there was tall, at least 6'3", with dark hair styled with casual precision, and wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car used to be worth before it died last winter. But it wasn't the expensive clothes or the height that made my pulse spike. It was the way he stood, the absolute stillness of someone who'd never had to prove his authority, because it radiated from him like heat from asphalt in summer. His eyes were dark, almost black in the diner's lighting, and they were fixed on Marcus with the kind of attention a predator gives prey. Behind him, near the door, stood another man. Built like a linebacker, hands clasped in front of him, watching the room with the practiced awareness of security. This is a private conversation, Marcus said, trying to inject authority into his voice, and failing spectacularly. The stranger smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression I'd ever seen. No. It's finished. Marcus opened his mouth to argue, looked at the stranger's face, then at the man by the door, and apparently reconsidered. He turned back to me, his expression a mixture of anger and something that might have been concern if I was generous enough to believe he was capable of it. We're not done talking about this, Emma. About Lily, about— Yes, you are. The stranger's voice remained quiet, but Marcus flinched as if he'd been struck. My ex-boyfriend left without another word, the bell above the door marking his departure with a cheerful jingle that felt obscene given the tension crackling in the air. I stood there, cloth still in my hand, staring at the man who'd just— what? Defended me? Threatened Marcus? Both? Thank you, I managed, my voice shakier than I wanted. You didn't have to. Your shift ends now. It wasn't a question. I glanced at the clock. He was right. 10 minutes had somehow evaporated during the confrontation. My boss was already counting the register, clearly wanting to close up. Yes, I need to change. Those dark eyes moved over me. Not in the way Marcus had looked at me, with judgment and possession, but with something else. Assessment. Interest. A hunger that made my skin prickle with awareness, and something dangerously close to excitement. The dress, he said, and somehow he'd seen it too, through that kitchen window. Wear it. It should have sounded like a command. It did sound like a command. But there was a question underneath it, a request wrapped in certainty, and I found myself nodding before I'd consciously decided to comply. I grabbed my bag from the back room, changed in the tiny bathroom that smelled like industrial cleaner and desperation, and emerged 5 minutes later feeling simultaneously exposed and powerful. The dress fit perfectly, hugging curves I'd forgotten I had, making me feel like someone other than the exhausted single mother who served coffee for a living. The stranger was waiting near the door, and when I approached, he extended his arm. Not grabbing, not demanding, offering, "I'm Alessandro," he said. And his accent carried the faintest trace of something Mediterranean, something that spoke of places far beyond this small Pennsylvania town. Emma. My hand looked pale and small against his suit jacket. I know. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. The reservation is for 8:30. We should go. Reservation. He'd made a reservation. For me. A stranger who'd walked into a dying diner at 11:45 at night and somehow knew my name. Knew when my shift ended. Knew— How did you— The car is outside. And it was. A black Mercedes S-Class with windows so deeply tinted I couldn't see inside, idling at the curb where the streetlight had been broken for 3 weeks. The man who'd been standing by the door, his security, opened the back passenger door with practiced efficiency. This was insane. This was dangerous. Every instinct I'd developed over 26 years of life was screaming at me to walk away, to go home to my studio apartment, to call my mother and make sure Lily was sleeping safely. But Alessandro was looking at me with those impossible dark eyes, and his hand was still extended, and I could still smell Marcus's cologne lingering in the diner's stale air, could still hear his voice asking where I was going dressed like that, as if I needed his permission, as if I hadn't earned the right to feel beautiful after everything I'd survived. I placed my hand in Alessandro's and let him guide me into the car. The interior smelled like leather and something subtle and expensive. Cedar, maybe, with notes of citrus. The seats were heated despite the mild spring night, and I sank into luxury I hadn't experienced in so long it felt like a memory from someone else's life. Alessandro slid in beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, far enough that I didn't feel trapped. The security guard took the passenger seat, and a driver I hadn't even noticed pulled away from the curb with smooth precision. "You're afraid," Alessandro observed, and it wasn't a question. "I don't know you." My hands were shaking slightly. I pressed them against my thighs, trying to still them. "No, but you're here anyway." He turned to look at me fully, and in the dim light of passing street lamps, his face was all sharp angles and shadows. Why? Because Marcus had looked at me like I was worthless. Because I was tired of being invisible. because something in Alessandro's eyes had seen me, really seen me, in a way no one had in longer than I could remember. "I don't know," I whispered. "Yes, you do." His hand moved, slowly, telegraphing the motion so I could pull away if I wanted. His fingers brushed my jaw, turning my face toward his. "You're here because you're tired of being afraid. Because you want something more than survival." His thumb traced my lower lip, and I felt that touch everywhere, like electricity running through water. "What do you want from me?" The question came out breathless. Alessandro's smile was slow, dangerous, full of promises I couldn't begin to decipher. "Everything." The restaurant was the kind of place I'd only seen in magazines, the kind where people didn't list prices on the menu because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford to be there. Soft amber lighting cast everything in a warm glow, and the walls were decorated with what I suspected were original paintings, not prints. A pianist played something classical and melancholic in the corner, the notes floating through air that smelled like expensive wine and fresh flowers. Every head turned when we entered. Not toward me, toward Alessandro. I felt the shift in atmosphere, the way conversations paused mid-sentence, the way the maitre d' appeared instantly, materializing like he'd been summoned by Alessandro's mere presence. "Mr. Vitale." The maitre d' gave a slight bow, an actual bow. "Your table is ready." We were led through the main dining room to a section I hadn't even noticed at first, a private area separated by frosted glass panels that obscured us from view while still allowing shadowy glimpses of the restaurant beyond. Our table was set for two, with candles already lit and a bottle of wine breathing beside crystal glasses that caught the light like trapped stars. Alessandro pulled out my chair, his hand brushing the small of my back as I sat, and that simple touch sent heat racing up my spine. He took the seat across from me, and I was grateful for the table between us because the intensity of his attention was almost overwhelming. The security guard, I still didn't know his name, positioned himself near the entrance to our section, his back to us, but his presence unmistakable. Another man in a similar dark suit appeared briefly, leaning down to whisper something in Alessandro's ear. Alessandro nodded once, dismissive, and the man vanished. "You have questions." Alessandro poured wine into my glass with steady hands. "Ask them." I had 1,000 questions. I had so many questions they were piling up in my throat, threatening to choke me. I picked the simplest one, the most immediate. "How did you know my name?" "I asked your manager 2 days ago." He said it casually, like it was normal to research diner waitresses. "I needed to know what time your shift ended, what days you worked." 2 days ago. He'd been watching me for 2 days, planning this, and I hadn't noticed. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, I felt something else, a dangerous thrill that mixed with the fear, making my pulse race. "Why?" Alessandro took a sip of his wine, considering me over the rim of his glass. "I saw you on Tuesday. You were carrying a tray of coffee cups and one of the customers, a businessman in a cheap suit, snapped his fingers at you. Do you remember?" I did. The memory made my jaw clench. The man had treated me like furniture, like an object that existed solely to serve him. And when I'd brought his coffee 30 seconds later than he wanted, he'd left no tip and complained to my manager. "You didn't flinch," Alessandro continued, his voice dropping lower, more intimate. "You didn't cry, didn't argue. You apologized with a smile that never reached your eyes, and then you went back to work. But for just a moment when you turned away, I saw something else in your face." "What?" The question came out as barely more than a whisper. "Fire." His eyes held mine, dark and intense. Rage. Pride. Everything you wouldn't let him see because you needed that job more than you needed dignity. My throat tightened. No one had ever looked at me closely enough to see that, to understand the constant calculation I performed every day. How much could I swallow? How much could I endure? What price was I willing to pay for survival? I don't understand what that has to do with... I despise men who treat women as less than they are. The quiet violence in his tone made me shiver. Men like that businessman. Men like the one who came to your workplace tonight. Marcus. He meant Marcus. You know about him too. "I know everything about you, Emma." Alessandro leaned forward slightly, candlelight throwing shadows across his features. "I know you have a daughter, Lily. 3 years old. I know your ex-boyfriend hasn't paid child support in 4 months. I know you work 60-hour weeks and still barely make rent. I know your car broke down in January, and you've been taking the bus ever since. I know you're 26 years old and you've been invisible for so long you've started to believe that's all you are. Each fact landed like a physical blow. The invasion of privacy should have made me angry, should have sent me running from the restaurant. But the way he said it, not with pity, not with judgment, but with a fierce, possessive knowledge, made me feel seen in a way that was both terrifying and intoxicating. That's stalking. I tried to inject some strength into my voice. Yes. He didn't deny it. Didn't apologize. It is. I should leave. But you won't. He was right, and we both knew it. I reached for my wine glass with trembling fingers, taking a larger sip than I'd intended. The wine was rich and complex, probably worth more than my weekly paycheck, and it burned pleasantly as it went down. A waiter appeared, silent, efficient, placing plates in front of us. I hadn't even looked at a menu, but the food was exquisite. Some kind of fish with saffron sauce, vegetables that looked like art. The waiter disappeared as quickly as he'd arrived, leaving us in our bubble of candlelight and tension. Eat, Alessandro said, and there was that command again, wrapped in concern. I picked up my fork, mainly to have something to do with my hands. The fish melted on my tongue, flavors I couldn't even name dancing across my palate. When had I last eaten something that wasn't instant noodles or leftover diner food? Tell me about Lily. His request was soft, genuine. And somehow, that broke something in me. I found myself talking about my daughter's laugh, about how she loved dinosaurs and refused to wear anything that wasn't purple, about how smart she was, how funny, how beautiful. I talked about the guilt that ate at me every day, about working doubles while she stayed with my mother, about missing bedtimes and scraped knees and first words. Alessandro listened with complete attention, asking questions that showed he actually cared about the answers. He didn't check his phone, didn't look away, didn't interrupt. The security guard remained motionless by the entrance, and occasionally I'd catch glimpses of other men in dark suits passing by our section, but Alessandro's focus never wavered from me. "You're a good mother," he said, when I finally fell silent. My plate somehow empty, though I barely remembered eating. I'm a broke mother who can barely see her own child. You're a mother who works 60 hours a week to provide for her daughter. There's a difference. His hand moved across the table, covering mine. His skin was warm, his grip firm without being constraining. "The money Marcus owes you, I can handle that." I pulled my hand back like I'd been burned. "No, absolutely not. Emma? I don't need your money, I don't even know you." The panic was rising now, reality crashing back in. "This is insane. This whole thing is insane. You stalked me. You learned everything about my life. You're offering me money. What do you want? Really? Because men like you don't do things like this without expecting something in return." Alessandro's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Approval, maybe, or respect. "You're right." He leaned back in his chair, and for the first time, I got a full sense of the power coiled in his frame, the danger lurking beneath the expensive suit. "I do want something." My heart hammered against my ribs. "What?" "You." The single word hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. "I want you to let me take care of you. I want you to stop working yourself to death in that diner. I want you to be able to see your daughter every day. I want to give you everything you've been denied." In exchange for what? Sex? I tried to sound defiant, but my voice shook. "In exchange for your trust." He paused, his gaze boring into me. "And yes, eventually, if you want me the way I want you, then that too. But I'm not interested in buying you, Emma. I'm interested in keeping you." The possessiveness in those last words should have sent me running. Instead, I felt heat pooling low in my belly. A dangerous attraction to this man who looked at me like I was something precious and breakable, and his. "I don't understand why." It came out plaintive, confused. "Why me?" Alessandro stood, moving around the table with predatory grace. He crouched beside my chair, bringing himself to my eye level, and the proximity made it hard to breathe. He smelled like cedar and something darker, muskier, something that made me want to lean closer. Because when I saw you being treated like nothing, you didn't break. Because when your ex-boyfriend tried to make you feel small tonight, you stood your ground. Because you're raising a daughter alone and working until you collapse and you still have fire in your eyes. His hand came up to cup my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone. Because I looked at you and felt something I haven't felt in 10 years. Want. Need. Hunger. His thumb traced my lower lip again, and this time I couldn't suppress the small sound that escaped me. I'm not a good man, Emma. His voice was rough now, strained. I've done things that would make you run if you knew. But I can give you safety, security, everything you need. All I ask is that you let me. Alessandro. The security guard cleared his throat, a subtle warning. Alessandro's eyes flickered with annoyance, but he stood, pulling a phone from his jacket pocket. He moved a few steps away, speaking in rapid Italian to whoever was on the other end. I caught only fragments, names I didn't recognize, numbers. Something about a shipment. When he returned, his expression had hardened slightly, the dangerous edge more pronounced. I need to handle something. He pulled out his wallet, black leather, thick with cards and cash, and extracted several bills, hundreds, multiple hundreds. He placed them on the table, for the meal, and for a car to take you home. I can't accept. You can, and you will. The command was back, no softness now. My driver will take you wherever you need to go. Tomorrow night, same time, I'll pick you up from the diner. I haven't agreed to see you again. Alessandro leaned down, his lips brushing my ear, and I felt that touch in every nerve ending. Yes, you have. His breath was warm against my skin. You agreed the moment you got in my car, the moment you let me see the real you. You're mine now, Emma. You just don't fully understand what that means yet. He pressed something into my palm, a business card, heavy stock, embossed with a name and a single phone number. Then he was gone, striding out of the private section with his security guard falling into step beside him, leaving me alone with expensive wine, uneaten dessert, and more money on the table than I made in a month. I sat there for a long moment, my hand still tingling where he'd touched me, my whole body thrumming with a dangerous cocktail of fear and desire. The card in my hand read simply, Alessandro Vitale with a phone number beneath. I knew I should throw it away. I knew I should block whatever number he'd used to find me, tell my manager I was being harassed, maybe even call the police. Instead, I tucked the card into my purse, finished my wine, and waited for the driver who appeared exactly 3 minutes later to take me home. The studio apartment felt even smaller when I returned, even more suffocating. I lay in bed staring at the water-stained ceiling, touching my lips where Alessandro's thumb had traced them, wondering what I'd just agreed to, and knowing, with terrifying certainty, that I would see him again tomorrow night. I called in sick the next morning. It was the first time I'd missed a shift in 8 months, and my manager's skeptical grunt told me exactly what he thought of my sudden flu. But I couldn't face that diner, couldn't stand under those fluorescent lights knowing Alessandro might walk through the door, knowing Marcus might come back, knowing everything had shifted in a way I couldn't undo. Instead, I took the bus to my mother's house, a 40-minute ride through neighborhoods that grew progressively nicer, until the houses had actual yards, and the cars in driveways didn't look like they might die at any moment. Lily was in the backyard when I arrived, her purple dress covered in grass stains, her dark curls escaping from the ponytail my mother had attempted. She looked up when the back door opened, and her face split into a smile that made my chest ache. "Mommy!" She launched herself at me with the fearless enthusiasm only a 3-year-old possessed. I caught her, breathing in the scent of her, strawberry shampoo and dirt and something indefinably sweet that was just Lily. This was why I worked 60-hour weeks. This was why I endured Marcus's condescension, and customers who snapped their fingers, and a life that felt like drowning. For these moments when my daughter's arms wrapped around my neck, and her laughter bubbled against my ear. "Hey, baby girl." I held her close, maybe a little too tight. Have you been good for Grandma? She let me have 2 cookies. Lily pulled back, her green eyes, my eyes, sparkling with mischief. And we watched the dinosaur movie 3 times. 3 times? I looked at my mother, who stood on the porch with her arms crossed and an expression that said we were going to talk later. She's very persuasive, Mom said dryly. Emma, can I speak with you inside? I set Lily down, watching as she immediately returned to whatever game she'd been playing with a collection of plastic dinosaurs. My mother led me into the kitchen that smelled like coffee and the cinnamon rolls she baked every Wednesday. Marcus came by yesterday. She didn't waste time. Looking for you. My stomach clenched. What did he say? That he was worried, that you were making bad choices, meeting strange men, neglecting your responsibilities. She paused, studying my face. He seemed genuinely concerned, Emma, almost frightened. Frightened. Marcus, who'd never been afraid of anything except commitment and honesty, had been frightened. The memory of Alessandro's quiet voice, she said leave, and Marcus's rapid retreat played through my mind. He doesn't get to be concerned about my choices. I kept my voice steady. Not after what he did. I agree. My mother poured 2 cups of coffee, sliding one across the counter to me. But I am concerned. You came home at 2 a.m. wearing a dress I've never seen before. And you've been staring at your phone every 5 minutes since you got here. So tell me, who is he? I wrapped my hands around the mug, letting the heat ground me. How could I explain Alessandro? The stalking that should have terrified me but instead made me feel seen. The money. The power. The way he'd looked at me like I was something precious and his. His name is Alessandro. I started with the simplest truth. I met him at the diner. And? Mom's eyebrow rose in that way that had always made me confess my secrets as a child. And he's intense. Wealthy. He wants to help me. Financially, I mean. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother set down her coffee cup with deliberate care. Emma Catherine Morrison, please tell me you're not getting involved with some kind of... She paused, choosing her words carefully with a glance toward the backyard where Lily played. Some kind of arrangement. It's not like that. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure what it was like. He just wants to help. Men don't just do anything, sweetheart. Especially not wealthy men. She reached across the counter, covering my hand with hers. I know things have been hard. I know Marcus left you in an impossible situation. But whatever this is, please be careful. You have Lily to think about, as if I ever stopped thinking about Lily. As if every decision I made wasn't weighed against her needs, her future, her safety. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out despite myself. An unknown number. But I knew who it was before I even opened the message. I hope you slept well. The car will pick you up at 8, no question. No request. Just the assumption that I would comply. That I wanted to comply. I typed back quickly, I'm not at home. I'm with my daughter. The response came immediately, where? I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the screen. Giving him my mother's address felt like crossing a line, like inviting him into the part of my life that was still innocent, still pure. But I'd already given him so much, just by getting in his car, by drinking his wine, by letting him touch my face with such possessive tenderness. I sent the address. I'll pick you up from there. Spend the day with your daughter, 8 o'clock. My mother was watching me with an expression that mixed concern and resignation. He's picking you up here, isn't he, Mom? I want to meet him. Her tone left no room for argument. If this man is going to be in your life, if he's going to be anywhere near my granddaughter, I want to look him in the eye. The thought of Alessandro meeting my mother should have been mortifying. Instead, I felt a strange flutter of something that might have been anticipation. What would he see when he looked at this modest house with its worn furniture and family photos covering every surface? Would he understand where I came from? What I was trying to protect? I spent the day with Lily, pushing aside thoughts of Alessandro and Marcus and money and danger. We played dinosaurs. We read books. We made lunch that Lily mostly wore instead of eating. For a few hours, I was just a mother with her daughter, and the world contracted to the size of my mother's backyard. But as the afternoon shadows lengthened, As 7 o'clock approached, and then 7:30, I felt the tension returning, coiling in my stomach like a snake preparing to strike. I changed back into the black dress. I'd brought it with me, unable to leave it behind, and fixed my hair in my mother's bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me seemed like a stranger. When had my eyes started holding that mixture of fear and hunger? When had I started looking like someone who would get into a car with a dangerous man and not look back? At 7:55, a black Mercedes pulled up outside my mother's house. I watched from the window as Alessandro emerged, and even from a distance, I could see the way he commanded space. He wore another suit, charcoal this time, with a black shirt underneath that made him look like he'd stepped out of a film about beautiful, dangerous men. The security guard from last night, plus another one I hadn't seen before, flanked him as he approached the front door. My mother reached the door before I could, opening it with the expression she used to wear when I brought boys home in high school. Protective. Assessing. Ready to eviscerate anyone who threatened her family. Mrs. Morrison. Alessandro's voice was respectful, his posture deferential in a way I hadn't seen before. Thank you for allowing me to collect Emma from your home. I didn't allow anything. My mother's tone was cool. My daughter is an adult who makes her own choices, but since you're here, you might as well come in for a moment. Alessandro's eyes found mine over my mother's shoulder, and something in his expression made my breath catch. Heat. Possession. Relief, as if he'd been worried I wouldn't be here. He stepped inside, and the house seemed to shrink around him. His security remained outside. I could see them through the window, positioned strategically, scanning the street with practiced awareness. "Mommy, who's that?" Lily's voice came from the hallway, and I turned to see her peeking around the corner, her dinosaur clutched against her chest. The change in Alessandro was instantaneous. The dangerous edge softened, and he crouched down, the same way he had in the restaurant, bringing himself to Lily's eye level. "Hello." His voice was gentle, non-threatening. "You must be Lily. Your mother has told me wonderful things about you." Lily studied him with the brutal honesty only children possess. "You're really tall." "I am." The corner of his mouth lifted. "Is that a Tyrannosaurus Rex?" "It's a velociraptor." Lily said it with the confidence of someone who knew her dinosaurs. "They hunted in packs and were really smart." "I didn't know that. Thank you for teaching me." Alessandro's attention was completely focused on my daughter, and something in my chest twisted painfully at the sight. "Lily, sweetie, go get ready for bed." My mother's voice was firm but kind. "Say goodnight to Mommy." Lily ran to me, and I knelt down to receive her hug, breathing her in one more time. "Be good for Grandma, okay? I love you so much." "Love you too, Mommy." She kissed my cheek, then surprised me by waving at Alessandro. "Bye, tall man." "Goodbye, Lily." He smiled. A real smile, warm and genuine. And I felt something dangerous shift in my chest. After Lily disappeared down the hallway, my mother turned to Alessandro with her arms crossed. "I don't know what your intentions are with my daughter, and frankly, I don't trust men who drive cars that cost more than my house. But Emma is smart, and she's strong, and if she's decided to see you, that's her choice. However," she stepped closer to him, and despite the height difference, she somehow managed to look intimidating. "If you hurt her, if you use her, if you do anything to put her or my granddaughter at risk, you will answer to me. Are we clear?" Alessandro met her gaze steadily. "Crystal clear, Mrs. Morrison, and for what it's worth, I have no intention of hurting Emma. My intention is to give her everything she deserves. We'll see." My mother turned to me, her expression softening. "Call me tomorrow. And Emma, trust your instincts." I kissed her cheek, then let Alessandro guide me outside with his hand on the small of my back. The security guards opened the car door, and I slid inside. Feeling the now familiar embrace of leather and luxury, Alessandro joined me, and the moment the door closed, the atmosphere shifted. We were in our bubble again, separated from the world by tinted windows and the soft purr of the engine. "Your mother is formidable," he said it with respect, almost admiration. "She raised me alone after my father left." I watched the houses blur past as we pulled away. "She knows how to be strong. You learned from her." His hand found mine in the darkness, fingers interlacing. "Lily is beautiful. Thank you." The simple statement felt inadequate for the surge of emotion his words provoked. "I meant what I said to your mother." Alessandro's thumb traced circles on my palm. "I want to give you everything you deserve, Emma. Starting with this." He handed me an envelope, thick, expensive paper, sealed with what looked like a wax emblem. "What is this?" "Open it." My hands shook as I broke the seal. Inside was a letter, formal, legal, and a check. I stared at the number, certain I was reading it wrong, that there couldn't possibly be that many zeros. "This is..." My voice failed. "The amount Marcus owes you in child support, plus interest, plus enough to cover 6 months of living expenses." Alessandro's voice was matter of fact, as if he hadn't just handed me more money than I'd seen in my entire life. "Consider it a gift. No strings attached." "Alessandro, I can't." "You can." His hand cupped my face, turning me toward him. "And you will. Because Lily deserves a mother who isn't working herself to death, because you deserve to breathe, because I want you to." The last reason, "because I want you to," hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. "What do you want from me?" I whispered the same question from last night, desperate for an answer that made sense. Alessandro leaned closer, his lips brushing my temple, my cheekbone, hovering just above my mouth. "I want you to stop fighting me." His breath was warm against my skin. "I want you to let me protect you. I want you to understand that you're mine now, Emma, mine to care for, mine to keep safe, mine." Then his mouth was on mine, and the kiss was nothing like I'd expected. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was possessive, consuming, a claim and a promise wrapped together. His hand tangled in my hair, holding me in place while his tongue traced my lower lip, demanding entrance. I opened for him, and the kiss deepened, became something hungry and desperate. His other hand gripped my waist, pulling me closer, and I went willingly, drowning in sensation. The taste of him, the scent of cedar and danger, the heat of his body against mine. When he finally pulled back, we were both breathing hard, and his eyes had gone almost black with desire. "Mine," he repeated. And this time I didn't argue. The car didn't take us to another restaurant. Instead, we drove through the city, past the neighborhoods I knew, into areas where the buildings grew taller and the streets cleaner. We pulled up to a high-rise that gleamed with glass and steel, its entrance guarded by a doorman who nodded respectfully as Alessandro helped me from the car. "Where are we?" My voice sounded small in the cavernous lobby with its marble floors and modern art installations. "Home." Alessandro's hand pressed against my lower back, guiding me toward a private elevator. His security guards remained in the lobby, speaking quietly into phones, their presence a constant reminder of who Alessandro really was. The elevator required a key card to operate, and we rose in silence. 30 floors, 40, 50. My ears popped from the pressure change and I swallowed hard, trying to calm the nervous energy coursing through me. The elevator opened directly into a penthouse apartment that stole my breath. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, the lights spreading out like a constellation. The space was modern but warm. Dark hardwood floors, furniture that looked custom-made, artwork that I suspected was worth more than everything I'd owned in my entire life combined. "Alessandro." I turned to find him watching me, his jacket discarded, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. "I shouldn't be here. Where should you be?" He moved closer, predatory and patient. "In your studio apartment with the rats? Working another double shift? Pretending you don't feel this between us?" He was right. And I hated that he was right. I could feel it. The pull between us, magnetic and inevitable. Every time he looked at me, every time he touched me, I felt myself falling deeper into whatever this was. "I don't understand what you want from me." The words came out plaintive, confused. "You say you want to take care of me, but men like you don't do that without expecting something in return. So tell me, what's the price, Alessandro? What do I owe you for the money, for the attention, for all of this?" His jaw tightened, and for a moment, I saw something dark flash in his eyes. Anger, maybe. Or hurt. that I'd reduced what he was offering to a transaction. "Come here." It wasn't a request. I should have refused, should have demanded he take me home. But my feet carried me forward until I stood close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body, close enough to see the way his pupils had dilated. "The price," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "is your honesty. I want you to stop pretending you don't want this. I want you to stop lying to yourself about what you feel when I touch you." His hand rose, fingers trailing along my jaw, down my neck, tracing the line of my collarbone exposed by the dress. Everywhere he touched left fire in its wake. "I want you to admit that when your ex-boyfriend looked at you like you were nothing, part of you wanted me to do more than make him leave. Part of you wanted me to hurt him forever, making you feel small." My breath caught because he was right. I had wanted that. In some dark corner of my soul I didn't like to examine, I'd wanted Alessandro to make Marcus feel the fear I'd lived with for months. "I want you to stop working at that diner." His other hand found my waist, pulling me flush against him. "I want you to move into a place where Lily has her own room, where you don't have to choose between paying rent and buying food. I want you to let me give you the life you should have had all along. And in return?" My hands had somehow found their way to his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady beneath my palms. "In return, you let me keep you." His forehead pressed against mine, his breath mingling with mine. "You let me protect you. You trust me when I say that no one will ever make you feel worthless again. You understand that from the moment I saw you, you became mine, and I don't let go of what's mine." The possessiveness should have scared me. It did scare me, but it also made something deep inside me unclench, some knot of tension I'd been carrying for so long. I'd forgotten what it felt like to breathe without it. "I'm not a possession." I tried to inject strength into my voice. "No." His lips brushed mine, feather-light, teasing. "You're something far more valuable. You're mine by choice. Say it, Emma. Tell me you want this." I should have said no, should have walked away, taken the check, used his money to build a better life, and never seen him again. But his hands were on my waist. His mouth was so close to mine, and I was so tired of being strong alone. "I want this." The admission felt like surrender and freedom all at once. Alessandro's control snapped. His mouth crashed against mine, and this kiss was different from the one in the car. Hungrier, more demanding. His hands roamed my back, finding the zipper of my dress and slowly, torturously pulling it down. The fabric loosened, and cool air hit my skin, but I didn't feel cold. I felt like I was burning. He broke the kiss long enough to look at me, his eyes seeking permission even as his hands held me captive. "Tell me to stop, and I will." But I didn't want him to stop. I wanted to forget about Marcus and money troubles and the weight of responsibility that had been crushing me for years. I wanted to feel wanted, desired, cherished. I wanted to be his, even if just for tonight. I reached up, tangling my fingers in his dark hair, and pulled him back down to me. The dress fell to the floor, pooling around my feet, and Alessandro's hands mapped my body like he was memorizing every curve, every scar, every imperfection I'd learned to hate. But the way he touched me, with reverence and hunger combined, made me feel beautiful, for the first time in years. He lifted me easily, my legs wrapping around his waist, and carried me through the penthouse to a bedroom that was all dark wood and soft lighting. The bed was enormous, covered in sheets that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and he laid me down on them like I was something precious. "You're shaking." His hand cupped my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone. "I'm scared." The honesty slipped out before I could stop it. Of me? Of this. Of how much I want this. Of what it means. I met his gaze, letting him see my fear and my desire tangled together. Of what happens when this ends. Alessandro's expression softened, and he lay down beside me, propping himself up on one elbow so he could look down at me. "What makes you think this ends?" "Everything ends." It was the truth I'd learned from my father leaving, from Marcus's betrayal, from every disappointment life had handed me. Especially good things. "Then we'll make sure this isn't a good thing." His lips curved into a small smile. We'll make it something permanent, something unbreakable. He kissed me again, slower this time, and his hands continued their exploration. Learning me, claiming me, I let myself fall into sensation, into the feeling of being wanted, of mattering to someone who looked at me like I was the center of his universe. Later, hours later, when the city lights had blurred with exhaustion and pleasure, and something that felt dangerously close to belonging, I lay in Alessandro's arms, my head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow. Tell me something true. My fingers traced patterns on his skin. Something you don't tell anyone else. He was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. Then, my father was killed when I was 16, shot in the back by someone he trusted. I found him. I lifted my head to look at him, seeing the pain etched in the lines around his eyes. I took over his business that same year. Had to prove I was strong enough, ruthless enough to fill his shoes. His hand stroked my hair absently. I've spent 10 years building an empire, and in all that time, I never let myself want anything I couldn't control. Until you, Alessandro. I saw you being treated like nothing, and something in me broke. His arms tightened around me, or maybe something finally healed. I don't know. But I knew I couldn't walk away. Couldn't leave you in that diner. Couldn't watch you destroy yourself for people who didn't deserve your sacrifice. What business? I asked, though part of me already knew, had known from the moment I saw his security guards, the way people looked at him with fear and respect. Nothing legal. He said it without shame or apology. But nothing that will touch you or Lily. I keep my world and yours separate. I should have been horrified, should have gotten up, gotten dressed, run as far and as fast as I could. But I'd already known, hadn't I? Some part of me had recognized the danger in him from the first moment, and I'd gotten in his car anyway. The money you gave me is clean. I have legitimate businesses too. Real estate, investments. The check came from those accounts. He tilted my chin up, forcing me to meet his eyes. I won't lie to you, Emma. My hands aren't clean, but I'll never let my dirt touch you. I believed him. God help me. I believed him. What happens now? I whispered. Now you stop working at the diner. Tomorrow we look at apartments, somewhere safe, somewhere Lily can have her own room and a backyard to play in. You start building the life you deserve. His thumb traced my lower lip. And you let me be part of it. People will talk. The reality was starting to sink in. Marcus will cause problems. My mother already doesn't trust you. Let them talk. Marcus won't be a problem. I'll make sure of it. And your mother will learn to trust me when she sees how I take care of you. His voice hardened slightly. Anyone who tries to hurt you, anyone who tries to take you from me, will regret it. The threat should have scared me. Instead, I felt safe for the first time in years. I curled back into his embrace, letting myself believe, just for tonight, that maybe fairy tales existed, that maybe women like me could be saved by dangerous men who looked at them like they were worth everything. Outside the windows, the city continued its endless dance of light and shadow, and somewhere in the distance, I heard sirens wailing, Alessandro's world, bleeding into the edges of mine. A reminder that this safety came with a price. But as his breathing evened out into sleep, as his arms remained locked around me even in unconsciousness, I decided the price was one I was willing to pay. I had been invisible for so long. Now someone saw me. Someone wanted me. Someone had claimed me as his. And for the first time since Marcus had walked out, leaving me with a baby and nothing else, I felt like maybe I could breathe. 3 weeks later, I stood in the kitchen of my new apartment. Our apartment, Alessandro kept calling it. Watching Lily chase bubbles in the backyard through the window. The space was everything I'd never let myself dream of. 3 bedrooms, hardwood floors, a kitchen with appliances that actually worked, and a fenced yard where my daughter could play safely. Alessandro had made it happen in less than a week. One conversation, a few phone calls in rapid Italian, and suddenly I had keys to a place that felt like a home instead of a survival shelter. But the fairy tale had complications. Marcus had shown up at the diner 4 days after Alessandro gave me the check, before I'd had a chance to quit, before I'd moved, when I was still trying to process everything that had happened. He'd been different that night, nervous. Looking over his shoulder like he expected something terrible to emerge from the shadows. "Emma, we need to talk." He'd cornered me during my break, his usual arrogance replaced by something that looked like genuine fear. "About this guy you're seeing, Alessandro Vitale." The way he said Alessandro's name, hushed, urgent, made my stomach clench. "What about him? Do you know who he is? What he does?" Marcus grabbed my arm and I'd yanked it away, the memory of Alessandro's possessive touch making anyone else's hands feel wrong. "Jesus, Emma, he's connected. Like, seriously connected. The Vitale family doesn't just own restaurants and real estate. They control half the illegal operations on the East Coast." I'd known. Of course I'd known. But hearing it said out loud, hearing the fear in Marcus's voice, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. "That's not your concern anymore. He came to see me." Marcus's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. 2 days ago, him and 2 guys who looked like they could break me in half. He told me that if I ever contacted you again, if I ever came near you or Lily, if I ever so much as thought about causing you problems, I'd regret it. Emma. He wasn't making idle threats. I could see it in his eyes. Part of me, the part that had endured months of Marcus's neglect and broken promises, felt a savage satisfaction. But another part, the part that was a mother, that needed to think about Lily's safety, felt ice-cold fear spreading through my veins. "Did he hurt you?" "No." But he made it very clear he could. Marcus looked at me with something that might have been genuine concern. "I'm going to pay the child support, all of it, regularly, whatever he wants. But you need to be careful, Emma. Men like him, they're dangerous. They don't just date women, they own them." After he'd left, I'd sat in the diner's break room, staring at my phone, Alessandro's number glowing on the screen. I should have been angry that he'd threatened Marcus without telling me, should have been terrified of what else he was capable of. Instead, I'd felt protected, claimed, his. Now, 3 weeks into this new life, I was learning what it meant to belong to Alessandro Vitale. It meant security guards, always at least 2 of them, positioned outside the apartment building. It meant a new phone, with a direct line to Alessandro, one that he answered within 2 rings no matter what time I called. It meant never worrying about money, about bills, about whether I could afford to buy Lily the purple sneakers she wanted, but it also meant rules. I couldn't go anywhere without telling Alessandro first. Couldn't take Lily to certain neighborhoods. Couldn't answer the door without checking with security. Couldn't live my life without the constant awareness that I was under surveillance. Not by enemies, but by the man who'd claimed me as his. The gilded cage, I'd started calling it in my head. Beautiful, comfortable, safe, but still a cage. The sound of the front door opening pulled me from my thoughts. Alessandro's voice carried through the apartment, speaking Italian into his phone, his tone clipped and authoritative. He appeared in the kitchen doorway moments later, ending the call and pocketing his phone, his dark eyes finding me immediately. "Kara." The endearment rolled off his tongue like honey. "You look troubled." I'd learned he could read me like a book, could sense my moods before I'd fully processed them myself. It was unnerving and comforting in equal measure. "I'm fine." I turned back to the window, watching Lily. Just thinking. Alessandro moved behind me, his arms wrapping around my waist, his chin resting on my shoulder. This close, I could smell cedar and gunpowder. He'd been at the shooting range then. He went 3 times a week, maintaining skills I tried not to think too hard about. Thinking about what? About how my life changed so fast. About whether I made the right choice. I leaned back into him despite myself, my body recognizing his before my brain could protest. About what happens when Lily gets older and starts asking questions I don't know how to answer. His arms tightened around me. What questions? About who you are, what you do, why there are always men with guns watching our apartment. I turned in his embrace, looking up at him. "She's 3 now, Alessandro. She doesn't notice. But what about when she's 6, 10, 16? Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, maybe. Or regret. By then, she'll understand that I protect her. That I protect you both. That's all she needs to know. Is it? I pressed my palm against his chest, feeling his heartbeat. Because I'm starting to realize how much I don't know. About your business, about your enemies, about the danger that might touch us just because we're yours. Nothing will touch you. His voice hardened, taking on the edge I'd heard when he dealt with his men. I've made sure of it. The apartment is secure. The guards are the best. Anyone who even thinks about threatening you will answer to me. That's not the point. Then what is the point, Emma? His hands cupped my face, forcing me to meet his gaze. Do you regret this? Regret me? Did I? That was the question that kept me awake some nights. Lying beside him in the massive bed, listening to his breathing, feeling the weight of his arm across my waist, like a claim and a promise. No. The admission came easier than it should have. I don't regret you. But I'm scared, Alessandro. I'm scared of how much power you have over my life. I'm scared of what it means that I can't imagine going back to how things were before. I'm scared that I'm teaching Lily that this is normal, that men who control everything, who have people killed. I saw the truth of it flash in his eyes. The confirmation he'd never speak aloud, are the kind of men we should love. I would never hurt you or Lily. His voice was fierce. Never. Everything I do to keep you safe. I know. And I did know. Could feel the truth of it in every possessive touch, every overprotective rule, every time he looked at me like I was the most precious thing in his dangerous world. But that doesn't make this less terrifying. Alessandro was quiet for a long moment, his thumbs tracing my cheekbones. Then, come with me. There's something I need to show you. He led me through the apartment to his office, a room I'd been in only a handful of times, always aware of the expensive technology, the locked filing cabinets, the secrets contained within. He pulled out a key, unlocking a drawer and extracting a thick folder. This is everything. He handed it to me. My legitimate businesses, my assets, my will. If something happens to me, everything goes to you and Lily. You'll be protected, provided for, untouchable. I stared at the folder, not opening it. Why are you showing me this? Because you need to understand what you mean to me. He turned my face up to his. I've spent 10 years building power, making sure no one could ever hurt me the way my father was hurt. I've been ruthless, cold, alone, and then I saw you, and everything I'd built suddenly had a purpose beyond survival. You and Lily. You're what I'm protecting. You're why I do what I do. Alessandro, I love you. The words hung in the air between us, raw and honest and terrifying. I've loved you since the moment I saw fire in your eyes while you smiled at a man who treated you like nothing. I love your strength, your sacrifice, your fierce protection of your daughter. I love that you challenge me, that you're scared but you're here anyway. I love you, Emma, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me. Tears blurred my vision. No one had ever said those words to me. Not Marcus, not anyone. I'd started to believe I was unlovable, that I was only worth what I could provide, what service I could render. I love you too. The words came out choked, broken. God help me, I do. Even though I'm terrified, even though I don't understand your world, even though I know I should run, I love you. Alessandro kissed me then, deep and possessive and tender all at once. And I kissed him back with everything I had. All my fear and hope and desperate need to believe that fairy tales could exist in the real world, even if they came wrapped in danger. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to mine. Marry me. I pulled back, certain I'd misheard. What? Marry me, Emma. He said it again, stronger, more certain. Not because I need to own you more completely. You're already mine. But because I want the world to know it. Because I want Lily to have my name and my protection legally. Because I want to wake up every morning for the rest of my life knowing you chose me. It was insane. We'd known each other for less than a month. I barely understood his world. There were 1,000 reasons to say no. But when I looked at him, at the dangerous, powerful man who'd seen me when I was invisible, who'd given me safety when I was drowning, who loved my daughter like she was his own, I couldn't find a single reason that mattered more than the way my heart leaped at the thought of being his forever. Yes. The word came out as barely more than a whisper. Yes. I'll marry you. Alessandro's smile was radiant, transforming his usually severe features into something boyish and beautiful. He kissed me again, and I felt him reach into his pocket, felt something cool slide onto my finger. I pulled back to look at my hand and gasped. The ring was stunning, a deep blue sapphire surrounded by diamonds, set in platinum. It caught the light and threw it back in brilliant sparks, beautiful and substantial, and utterly unlike anything I'd ever imagined wearing. It was my mother's. Alessandro's voice was soft. The only thing I have left of her. She'd want you to have it. I couldn't speak around the lump in my throat, could only throw my arms around his neck and hold on while tears streamed down my face. Tears of joy and fear and overwhelming gratitude for this impossible, dangerous, perfect love. A knock on the office door interrupted us. One of Alessandro's men, Giovanni, the one who usually drove us, stood in the doorway with his phone in hand. "Boss, we have a situation." Alessandro's demeanor shifted instantly, the tender lover replaced by the commanding presence I'd only glimpsed. "What kind of situation?" "The Carmichael crew. They're making noise about territory. Specifically, they're asking about the girl." Giovanni's eyes flicked to me, apologetic. "About Emma." I felt Alessandro's entire body tense, felt the danger radiating from him like heat. "Handle it. I want names, locations, everything. And double the security here. No one gets within a block of this building without my knowing about it." "Already done, boss." After Giovanni left, Alessandro turned back to me, and I could see him struggling to soften his expression, to be the man who'd just proposed, rather than the one who'd just ordered someone's death. Because that's what handle it meant. I was learning to understand the language of his world. "You're in danger because of me." It wasn't a question. "You're protected because of me," he corrected, his hands gripping my shoulders. "There's a difference. These people, they're testing boundaries, trying to find weakness. They won't find it. You and Lily are untouchable, Emma. I promise you that." I wanted to argue, to point out that being untouchable meant living in a fortress, meant security guards and restricted movements, and the constant awareness of threats. But when I looked into Alessandro's eyes, I saw the truth. This was his world, and I'd chosen to enter it. For better or worse, I was his now, and his protection came with his dangers. "What do we tell Lily?" I glanced toward the backyard, where my daughter still played, oblivious to the violence swirling at the edges of her world. "We tell her we love her. We tell her she's safe. We tell her that sometimes the best families are the ones we choose, not the ones we're born into." Alessandro pulled me close, his arms creating a shield around me. "And we make sure that every day of her life, she knows she's cherished." I leaned into him, letting myself believe in the safety of his embrace, letting myself trust that his love was stronger than his dangers. That evening, we sat in the backyard together, Alessandro, Lily, and me. My daughter climbed into Alessandro's lap without hesitation, showing him her collection of rocks she'd found, and he listened with complete attention, asking questions about each one, treating her discoveries like they were treasures. Watching them together, watching this dangerous man be gentle with my child, I felt something settle in my chest. Maybe our family wasn't traditional. Maybe our love story had started with stalking and money and threats. Maybe our future would always have shadows lurking at its edges. But it was ours. We'd chosen each other, me with my wounds and my daughter, him with his darkness and his empire. We'd built something beautiful from broken pieces, and I was done apologizing for it. Later, after Lily was asleep in her purple bedroom, Alessandro and I stood at the window overlooking the city, his arms wrapped around me from behind, the sapphire on my finger catching the light. And he pressed a kiss to my temple. "No regrets?" he murmured against my skin. I turned in his arms, rising on my toes to kiss him, tasting my answer on his lips before speaking it aloud. No regrets. Not anymore. And as the city lights spread out before us like a sea of stars, as Alessandro held me like I was precious and his and forever, I finally understood what it meant to be seen, to be chosen, to be loved by a man who would burn the world down to keep me safe. This was my fairy tale, dark and dangerous, and absolutely real, and I wouldn't change a single thing.